The meeting to order of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Welcome to number 5 of the House of Commons Standing Committee. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of September the 23rd, 2020. The proceedings are available via the House of Commons website. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on a video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee will now proceed with that study of trade between Canada and the United Kingdom, a potential transitional trade agreement. We welcome as our witnesses today for the full 2 hours from the Business Council of Canada, Trevor Kennedy, Director Policy, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Mark Agnew, Senior Director International Policy, and from the Canadian Labour Congress, Hassan Youssef, President, and Chris Roberts, the Director Social and Economic Policy for Trade Justice Network, and Larry Brown, President, National Union of Public and General Employees. Mr. Kennedy, the floor is yours for 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you for the invitation to take part in your meeting on trade between Canada and the United Kingdom, a potential transitional trade agreement. The Business Council of Canada is composed of 150 chief executives and enterprises of Canada's leading enterprises. Our members directly and indirectly support more than 6 million jobs across the country and hundreds of thousands of small businesses. And for our members, trade is very important. So Canada is a trading nation. 65% of our GDP is tied to trade, and millions of good-paying jobs across the country are connected to the flow of goods and services around the world. But we cannot take this for granted. In recent years, some of our most important trade relationships have been undermined by rising protectionism and uncertainty. At the same time, the multilateral rules-based global trading system, the foundation for post-war prosperity that has led to increased living standards for Canadians, is at risk. Given this backdrop, not to mention the economic hardship caused by COVID-19, Canada needs stable and secure bilateral trade agreements, particularly with key partners in the Indo-Pacific and Europe, to both safeguard and diversify our trade. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CIIT, has been particularly important in achieving both objectives. At a time when growth in global trade is slowing, our exports to the European Union have grown at a fast rate, 7.7% in 2019, and bilateral trade flows have stabilized. There's still much work to do to ensure that small and medium-sized enterprises can take full advantage of this agreement and to address some industry-specific concerns. But in the big picture, CIIT is working for Canadian exporters. The UK, as a part of the EU, has been a critical component of this fast-growing trade relationship under CIIT. As of 2019, it accounted for 40% of Canada's merchandise exports and 36% of services exports to the European Union. Merchandise exports to the UK have grown by nearly 12% since provisional application. Canadian exporters have momentum in the UK, and it's important that this continues. The last few years have clearly demonstrated how important the UK market is for Canadian business. Early in the Brexit process, many expected that Canadian firms would move operations from the UK, largely based on the assumption that it was being primarily used as a launchpad for business into the European Union. And while we've seen some staff move from continental operations or move to continental operations and have seen the establishment of new satellite offices elsewhere in the EU, for the most part, Canadian firms have remained committed to the UK. This is because it is valued as a market for goods and services providers, and London continues to be an important financial capital. Among Business Council members, at least a third have a meaningful presence in the market, and for some, the UK is their only market in Europe. For these reasons, it is critical that we maintain our access beyond the end of the Brexit transition period. The transitional trade deal approach taken by negotiators is wise given the circumstances. We do not know what the future UK-EU trade relationship will look like, and a transitional deal or transitional approach gives us the opportunity to take that future relationship into account when we negotiate a trade deal. We also have faced a rapidly changing environment and we've been pressed for time. As with Canada's existing free trade agreements, we want to ensure we reach a conclusive deal in the future with the appropriate consultation and assessment for the market opportunities for Canadian firms. The transitional approach will allow us to do this while we maintain our position in the market. Japan and South Korea have already finalized agreements to roll over most of their existing EU trade deals. And at the same time, Australia, New Zealand, and the US are negotiating deals not based on existing frameworks with the European Union. Some of these talks appear to be advanced, and if are in place without a transitional deal for Canada, they could result in Canadian firms losing their market share and first mover advantage that we secured under CITA. A transitional deal will preserve this important relationship, and we encourage both sides to move quickly to limit disruption at the end of the year. Canada's transitional deal should be designed to be temporary by including reasonable review clauses or expiry dates. We support this approach as an incentive to drive continued bilateral talks towards a long-term agreement. So business leaders support the conclusion and swift ratification of a transitional deal to keep Canada-UK trade tariff-free, to make the economy more vibrant and competitive, and to drive investment and support for the creation of high-value jobs. Looking forward in the Canada-UK trade relationship, we believe there's an opportunity to rethink and enhance bilateral trade and investment ties with a comprehensive and ambitious free trade agreement. And we hope both parties can start working on this with stakeholders as soon as possible. So thank you for this opportunity to address the committee, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. On to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Mark Agnew. Please, the floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and honourable members for the invitation to speak as part of the committee's UK study. It's a pleasure to be back here and see you all again virtually. As committee's members will appreciate, the UK is a significant trading partner for Canada as our third largest goods export market and second largest destination for foreign direct investment abroad. As Trevor alluded to a moment ago, it's quite important, particularly in the EU 28 context, with 40% of our merchandise exports and 36% of our services exports from the EU 28 going to the UK. However, despite the impressive overall rankings, it still is an overall small proportion of our global trade share behind the United States. The relationship we feel has potential to grow, and certainly Britain is an ideal market for Canadian companies seeking to diversify given its shared language and ways of doing business. With the EU separation question firmly decided into the UK, we need to look ahead to dealing with the world as it is. The reality means that once the UK's transition period with the EU ends on December 31, the UK will no longer be treated as if it were a party to CITA by the Government of Canada. Given how important the UK is as part of the EU's 28 export basket, the short answer is that Brexit matters for Canadian businesses. The Canadian Chamber has not completed our own in-house modeling, but some external work serves as a rough guide for what the potentials are. Canadian economist Dan Churiak conducted analysis in 2018 as part of the British government's CITA impact assessment. The study found that by 2030, the value of the UK's participation in CITA was worth about £1.1 billion, or approximately 1.9 billion Canadian dollars in terms of Canadian exports to the UK. Although this is definitely not a precise measurement, given A, we don't know the final architecture of the UK's trade arrangements with the EU and Canada. We don't know B, what the UK's sort of final picture will be in 2030, given that the study was done with a 10-year time horizon. And we also have divergences in the UK and the EU's MFN tariff rates, but it nonetheless provides at least a decent rough signpost on the potential for what a UK-Canada trade deal means to the Canadian economy. I'd like to just be a bit more specific now on some of the immediate implications of not having a transition agreement in place by December 31. Number one are tariffs. and Canadian businesses will lose preferential access to the UK market, making our products less competitive. Some examples of where we would face tariffs under the UK's global tariff regime include lobster products with tariffs of up to 10%, plastics under HS 3908 with tariffs of up to 6%, vehicles under HS 8703 with tariffs of up to 10%, and beef products under HS 201 with an ad valorem tariff of 12% plus specific tariff units per kilogram. And I should add here, note that Canadian beef products have a TRQ under CITA, and certainly any TRQs that are transposed into a UK-Canada context need to be commercially viable for Canadian companies to take advantage of them. The second benefit that I would like to draw to your attention that we will not have without a transition agreement in place are the discussions around regulatory cooperation. The CITA provides a framework for critical regulatory dialogues to occur on agriculture non-tariff barriers and through the conformity assessment protocol. Regulatory cooperation is not glamorous, it's the nuts and bolts of trade and absolutely critical. Our trade agreements have an important role in shining a spotlight on the work that regulators do to make sure that issues are advancing in a timely manner for businesses. And certainly agriculture non-tariff barriers have been quite problematic in the EU context, and we hope that the UK will eventually take a different approach. The last area are services exports. The CITA's temporary entry chapter provides provisions on intra-company transferees, and this means that Canadian companies can bring in specialized talent to work at Canadian operations. The CITA's contractual service suppliers provisions mean that specialized skills can be brought in to fill supply chain gaps for Canadian businesses. The CITA's provisions on these entry categories reduce business burdens, and without them in a UK context, companies will need to use other routes that are more cumbersome. Simply put, if CITA matters, then transitioning it into a bilateral agreement also matters. We've been working closely with our UK counterparts at the Confederation of British Industry to advance this, and will continue to do so until the deal is done. And certainly we hope this committee will be able to facilitate an expeditious passage of the implementing legislation once the agreement is finalized. As members of the committee will appreciate, everything you do in trade builds on what came before it. CITA was a gold standard when it was negotiated, but the Canada-UK transition agreement should be seen as a starting point for going further. I'd like to quickly highlight 5 areas where we think we can do this. First is digital trade. Since the CITA's negotiation, global trade discussions on digital trade rules have taken on much greater focus. This includes the WTO, as well as our digital trade chapters in CPTPP and CUSMA. Discussions with the UK on digital trade should support cross-border data flows by Canadian companies. Number 2 is regulatory cooperation. The future gains on merchandise trade will ultimately be driven by reducing non-tariff barriers, given how low applied tariff rates are for most products. This is particularly important for Canadian agriculture exports, as I alluded to a moment ago, where it's been a tough slog in the EU. But there's also forward-looking work that we can do in areas like health sciences, procurement, as well as cybersecurity. Number 3 is critical minerals. The global supply of rare earth minerals that enable the production of many high-tech products remains dangerously concentrated, and future discussions between the UK and Canada should facilitate greater private sector production and movement of these rare earth extracted products. Fourth is trade facilitation. The pandemic has emphasized the value of the efficient movement of goods globally, and Canada and the UK should explore ways to introduce additional measures that would modernize customs processes in CITA and build on the TFA agreement from the WTO. Fifth and finally is labor mobility. Enhancing the ability of companies to attract talent and access services contracts abroad is critical to diversifying what we are exporting, not just to where. Activities like after-sales servicing can actually be more lucrative for companies than the original export itself, and so we should try to be ambitious in how do we approach this business activity. And without a bilateral agreement in place, certainly these 5 areas and work on other areas like sustainability will be difficult to go further on. Thank you for your consideration. We look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agnew. On to the Canadian Labour Congress. Mr. Youssef, the President, please go ahead for 10 minutes.
I should say good morning. It's still morning, Madam Chair, and of course, committee members. Thank you for having us, and my colleagues, Chris Roberts, who will also join me in the question period if there are any. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. It's a pleasure, of course, for us to be here. The Canadian Labour Congress is the largest central labour body. The CLC brings together some 50 national and international unions across Canada. As well, it gathers some 12 provincial and territorial federations of labor and 100 labor councils across the country. And the CLC speaks on issue of national importance for 3 million unionized men and women. These individuals work both in the public and private sector in both trade exposed and trade shelter industries. The CLC perspective on international trade, Canada has always been a trading nation. It is small, open economy relying on export. The CLC has always advocated for fair trade as opposed to free trade. In our view, the international trade and investment rules should foster inclusive and equitable and sustainable economic growth. Trade rules should boost employment and real income, not destroy jobs and raise the cost of living. They should lift incomes and improve working conditions, not drive them down. They should, of course, lift incomes and improve working conditions and not drive them down. They should reduce inequality and not worsen it. They should encourage, of course, and reinforce the capacity of government to pursue full employment and regulate in the public interest and not erode or curtail these powers. They should, of course, be designed transparently in public involvement and debate and not behind closed doors, with multinational investor calling the shots. In other words, international trade agreement should be first and foremost serve the interests of working people and ordinary residents in Canada. Trade agreements should be an opportunity, of course, to strengthen labor and environmental protection, toughen safeguards for women and migrant workers, lift food safety and public health standards. Far too long, trade agreements have been negotiated, hidden from civil society and responding mainly to corporation investor. The terms of trade agreement has been about shackling, of course, the ability of governments to regulate, invest, and spend in the public interest. A trade agreement with the United Kingdom, the government of Canada has signaled its commitment to negotiate progressive trade agreements with trading partners. In our view, the comprehensive economic trade agreement with the European Union, CETA, should not be the standard to negotiate a bilateral trade agreement with the United Kingdom. In several important aspects, CETA has been, of course, surpassed by the provision of Canada, United States, and Mexico CUSMA agreement. Investor-state dispute settlement. The CUSMA eliminated the investor-state dispute settlement (ISDS) mechanism in Chapter 11 of NAFTA. In our view, the ISDS provision must be omitted from Canada's future trade agreement. There is no reason for our principal trading partner, particularly rich industrial countries with well-developed domestic court system, need these mechanisms. These arrangements are nothing more than a means for large corporation investors to curtail and dissuade government regulations for private gain. Under NAFTA agreement, Canada was sued some 40 times and forced to pay over $300 million in penalties and fees. The majority of trade disputes involves Canada environmental laws. It is simply unacceptable. In our view, there is no need for a CETA-style investment court system allowing foreign transnationals to sue governments outside of the UK or Canadian court systems. Labor rights. The CLC perspective, any new agreement with the United Kingdom must include robust, fully enforceable provisions for labor rights. The CETA provision is not fully enforceable. Instead, they are subjected to a non-binding compliance mechanism, relying, of course, on cooperation, dialogue, through a process of consultation advice from any expert panel. The CUSMA brings labor provision into the main agreement as a standalone labor chapter. As a result, labor rights in CUSMA are fully subject to the state-to-state dispute settlement process in the agreement. CUSMA also commits each country to implement policies to protect workers against sexual harassment, wage employment, discrimination on the basis of sex. This includes discrimination on the basis of pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, caregiving, and responsibility. The CUSMA include new provisions committing signatories to take steps to prohibit the importation of goods produced by forced labor, address violence against workers exercising their labor rights, and ensure that migrant workers are protected under the labor laws. CUSMA also include new facilities, specific rapid response. This mechanism provides for enhanced provision to ensure effective implementation of labor obligation that covers facilities. In our view, the labor provision in CUSMA should be the starting point for Canada's future trade agreements. Future trade agreements should also require signatures to uphold fundamental labor rights contained in the International Labour Organization core convention. These commitments should be fully enforceable. Pharmaceutical drugs. Canada's spending on pharmaceuticals, patent drug prices are among the highest in the world. Canadians already pay far more for prescription drugs and face higher drug prices than their counterparts in most OECD countries. Both the CITA and CUSMA agreement will contribute further to rising up drug costs by delaying the entry of generic medicine. Any future trade agreement with the United Kingdom cannot aggravate the problem. Pharmaceutical companies must receive future protection at the expense of Canadians. Climate change. CIIT chapter on trade sustainable development and trade environment contain positive commitments on the environment. However, the commitments are not binding, and there are no effective enforcement mechanism in CITA in environmental commitment. For its part, CUSMA is silent on climate change. Further trade investment agreement must contain binding commitment to combat climate change. They must avoid ISDS clause that will directly undermine the ability of government to live up to their climate change commitment. Public service. In 2016, European opposition over perceived threats to public service nearly unpenned the signing of the CITA agreement. In order to get the deal done, the parties had to craft a joint interpretive instrument containing assurances about the autonomy of governments to provide, regulate, and create expanded public service. However, the text of CITA itself does not fully effectively exclude public service. To correct this, any new agreement and investment agreement should include a clear and fully effective exclusion of public service. Such provision should ensure all levels of government can create new public service, expand existing ones, reverse privatization without the risk of sanctions or compensation claims under the trade investment trade agreements. Regulatory cooperation. CITA regulatory cooperation chapter and its regulatory cooperation forums are aimed at eliminating regulatory differences between Canada and the EU. These initiatives will target regulation pertaining to food safety, biotechnology, chemical and consumers, and environmental protection. These regulations are often characterized as impeding market access and hindering trade. However, these regulations often result of popular consumers' demand for food safety, health, and environmental protection. CITA regulatory reform discussion also occurs in forums that lack transparency and domestic accountability and tends to be dominated by industry and commercial interests. This sort of approach to regulatory cooperation will not inspire public confidence. Canada can and should ensure greater transparency and democratic accountability in the regulatory chapters. The further trade agreement. Conclusion. Our trade relationship with the United Kingdom is virtually important, but in order to achieve a truly progressive agreement governing Canada and UK trade, we must have rules that ensure trade benefits the many rather than the few. Trade rules must instill confidence in government's ability to regulate on behalf of working people, and their interests and voices of working people must be included in the development of any agreement. Recent experience in the North America and Western Europe has made one lesson perfectly clear. Trade and investment agreement that brings benefit to a small elite and job losses and declining prospect of working people will show popular resentment and opposition. Thank you so much. I look forward to any question the committee members may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Youssef. And on to Mr. Brown, the President of National Union of Public and General Employees.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this morning. Let me start with what I think is a very important point that hasn't been covered yet, that when we get into looking at any potential new trade deals, labeling is really important. Because I remember when the Trans-Pacific Partnership was a terrible deal and wasn't worth signing on to. But when we relabeled it the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, all of a sudden it got to be a good deal. So I think the most important thing is not the content, but the label. Perhaps a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but that was quite an interesting process to watch. The transformation of the TPP into a good deal by a relabeling of the agreement just still puzzles me to this day. We're facing two crises in Canada. Not just in Canada, around the world, we're facing two crises. One is COVID, and the other is climate change. And from our point of view, it strikes us that rethinking the whole notion of trade agreements under the wing of these two crises is a very important process, because Under COVID, remember, in the early days, we had all kinds of problems because we didn't have enough manufacturing capacity in Canada. We were having to get our personal protective equipment from other countries. The N95 masks had to be manufactured outside of Canada. And the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, said, we're never going to let that happen again. We're going to develop Canadian manufacturing capacity. And it seems to me, although Mr. Ford and I aren't on the same page on many things, that seems to me to be a very important point. That why would we be relying on other countries for so much of what we need in Canada instead of developing our own capacity? And to develop our own capacity, even for protective equipment, may mean violating some of the terms of the existing trade deal, and we have to accept that. Those trade deals prevent countries from looking after their own economy. The second is the climate crisis. Does it really still make sense for us to be exporting our resources to other countries so that they can make it into product and sell it back to us, all the while having transportation costs and the cost of the environment of all of that trade back and forth? Surely we should be at least revisiting the notion that for us to continue to manufacture a limited number of things and sell it and then import everything else is dangerous to the climate. And surely we should be thinking about that. While I'm talking about COVID, Hassan Mr. Youssef just mentioned that we need to make sure that we don't have ISDS clauses. I'm sure the committee knows that as a result of ISDS and the Trans-Pacific Partnership and CITA, we have buckets full of cases ready to go. Well, that's somebody's shaking their head, but that happens to be a fact. I've read from several different law firms the fact that they have a whole bunch of ISDS cases ready to go against countries that dared to close down their economy under COVID. And they label it. They say that if you had to close down your businesses because of COVID, there may be an ISDS case there. If you had rent relief imposed by the government, there may be an ISDS case there. That's not coming from some left-wing radical lunatic. That's coming from the law firms that are poised to file those cases. So we not only need to not make sure that we never sign on to another ISDS clause, we got to double back and make sure that we're protected under the ones we've already signed on to. There's an assumption so far this morning that trade deals are pretty good things and they're automatically good, and they're good because we say they're good. But I want to ask a question. What do trade deals do? Well, they weaken democracy, for sure, because they're always negotiated in secret, and they bind governments and say that there's a bunch of things governments can no longer do. They increase income inequality. Every study that's ever been done about income includes trade deals as one of the major features of it. They endanger public services, because every trade deal has a ratchet clause that you can privatize, but once you've privatized, you can't move backwards to bringing it back into the public sector. Whether we can develop new public services after signing on to CITA and the the new improved Trans-Pacific Partnership is an open question. They give corporations more rights to challenge governments than citizens of the country have. They endanger our environment and they kill jobs. So do they increase trade? I mean, if we got all those negative effects, is there anything positive that we can say? And you know what? There's been several studies that indicate that trade increases with countries that we don't have trade deals with just as much as it does with countries we do. There's no empirical evidence anywhere that says that trade deals actually improve trade. There is a lot of evidence that say trade increases with or without a trade deal, and sometimes we get more increases where we don't have a deal. So what's the evidence that a trade deal is good for the economy? NAFTA? We lived under NAFTA for however many years, far too long. Thousands of manufacturing jobs left, hundreds of Canadian factories closed, wages stagnated. That's the good part, or what? There's a lot of ways in which NAFTA was a dangerous mistake for the Canadian economy. In what way was it a good deal? Where's the empirical study that say we got some benefits out of signing on to the original NAFTA? The Canada-US one, or the United States Marine Corps one, as Trump would call it, is too new to have the empirical evidence, but we went into it assuming that we absolutely needed to protect an agreement that had never been proved to be all that valid in the first place. CITA has been studied. It hasn't been studied, well, remember when we were being told what a great deal CITA was, there was going to be thousands and thousands of jobs created and a gajillion worth of increase in the gross domestic product. Mr. Trump would have been proud of the way that CITA was sold in the first place. It was specious claims that had no validity at all. But there have been real studies of what CITA is going to do. And there's a UN researcher and a Delft University economist who report that CITA will eliminate 227,000 jobs by 2023. And a lot of those jobs are going to be in Canada, unfortunately. Several thousand of them are going to be Canadian jobs. And as a result of that, they predict that CITA is going to drive down wages again, even though wages have stagnated for so many years. Competitive pressures will cause unemployment, inequality, and welfare losses. And they basically say that factor has to be part of the informed assessment of any trade deal. Let me there be one or two things that have said so far that may be slightly provocative, and that's a possibility. And so I want to make sure I leave time for people to throw darts at me. Let me just say that I completely agree with Hassan's description of what needs to be in trade deals. We can't have any more ISDS. We have to have an obligation, not just to live up to a country's own rules, but if we're going to be part of a trade deal, there has to be an obligation to fight climate change. It can't be just, well, make sure that you pay lip service to climate change. If we're going to make a trade deal that's going to make climate change worse by increasing trade, then at least we've got to factor in some compensating measures that countries have to take to bring climate change under control. Enforceable labor rights. I sat through so many meetings when it was we were told that CITA had the best labor rights that any agreement had ever had, which was true except for the little detail that they weren't enforceable. And that's just not acceptable any longer. We need to respect gender, indigenous rights. We need to make sure that regulatory cooperation doesn't mean making sure that we go down to the lowest common denominator, but in fact, we go up to the highest common denominator. And we've got to exempt public services from any trade deal going forward, including with the UK. There should be no reason for public services in the UK or in Canada to be on the block as a result of a new trade deal. So those are some of the things that need to be in it. And could we possibly, for the umpteenth time, reiterate that trade deals negotiated in secret are not a good idea, and that the whole process needs to be public so that the public can tell what's being done in their name. Thank you for your time.
Madam Chair, you are muted.
All right, thank you very much to all the witnesses. On to Ms. Gray now, please, for 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses that are here today. I'd like to pose my first questions for Mr. Agnew of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce wrote a joint letter with the Confederation of British Industry, your counterpart in the United Kingdom, to the government on September 21st of this year, explaining that the clock was ticking on a trade deal, and that was about 2 months ago. What prompted you to write that letter?
Well, thank you, Ms. Gray, for the question. So what had prompted us to write the letter was simply that December 31st is rapidly approaching. We have a domestic legislative process that needs to follow on from the conclusion of any deal, and time was running short, now, and it was running short then when we wrote the letter. And certainly, if you're a business who needs to lock in pricing contracts for January 1st for your exports, you want to know what the tariff is that you may be paying. And so that's why we wrote the letter, to underscore the urgency of concluding this agreement.
Okay, thank you. Have you seen any outreach from the minister or from the minister's office looking for input from businesses as they negotiate right now with the United Kingdom?
So although, say in juxtaposition to what you might see under, say, Canada's negotiations with ASEAN, where there had been a formal Gazette notice, to my knowledge, there had not been any formal Gazette notice for the UK process. I will say that both the Minister's Office and departmental officials at GAC have certainly been responsive whenever we've contacted them seeking an update on the file.
Great. Well, thank you. And that's really interesting. I mean, it's one thing to be responsive. It's another thing to be proactive and actually go out and look for information as you're going into those negotiations. So that's quite interesting. Recently, the Prime Minister made statements that the United Kingdom doesn't have the bandwidth and lacks experience to negotiate with the United Kingdom. And UK international trade ministers denied this, and we see them negotiating with other countries and signing trade deals. Would you say comments like this from our Prime Minister are not really helpful right now?
Well, I mean, I think anytime you're in a negotiation, there's going to be a lot of heated rhetoric. I still remember what someone said to me about CITA, where when you get to the end, there's drama, both real and manufactured. Whether this is real or manufactured, I mean, it's not for me. I'm not in the room. But I think we need to put our nose to the grind on this, and let's sort of set aside the sort of accusations on both sides and focus on actually getting a deal done, because that's what businesses want, is certainty for January 1st.
Okay, thank you. I saw recently the Canadian Chamber is a joint signatory to a document called Strengthening Canadian Supply Chain Resiliency, and you actually talked about some of the points here today in your opening statement. And there's a section in there about trade agreements and resolving non-tariff barriers. Have you heard if the government is negotiating some of these non-tariff barriers with the United Kingdom? And are you concerned about this?
So as I understand it, the non-tariff barriers have been so far discussed at an EU level, given the UK hasn't sort of fully divorced itself from the EU rulebook. They will, as I again understand, copy over the EU rulebook on January 1st. So what we're hoping to see actually is that we'll be able to pick up those discussions with the UK as soon as possible at the beginning of next year, because they have been a problem for businesses looking to take advantage of CITA in the EU 28.
Okay, which trade or potential tariffs would you be most concerned with? I know that there's a number of industries that this could potentially affect, and you've written about this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can maybe expand for us today, which are of most concern for you if we don't have secure an agreement by the end of the year?
Well, as a multi-sector association, I appreciate my members' concerns equally across all industries, so I wouldn't want to start sort of singling out particular ones, but I think the ones that I had noted in my remarks around lobster tariffs, vehicles, beef, plastics, those are the ones that certainly have come to mind, and ones that we've sort of are hearing some concerns about.
Okay, one of the other areas is, of course, with the UK being the second largest market and a major trading partner for us for foreign investment. Are you concerned that not having a transitional agreement in place could significantly harm these cross-border investments that we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're looking at how companies might decide to structure their business, investment and exports can go hand in hand, and certainly what you might see in a UK-Canada context will actually be compounded by the UK's divorce from the EU, where Canadian companies have set up shop in the UK and use that as a base to access continental Europe. I mean, the UK-EU discussion isn't necessarily our sort of dog to fight. We're not there in the room, but the compounding effect could be quite problematic for companies.
Mm. Do any of your members have any specific examples around that? Like, have you heard of some areas that are maybe a top of concern compared to others?
None that I would sort of be able to say in a public forum like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I know one of the other things that you had talked about is the Trade Commissioner service and the opportunity for trade promotion. Have you heard if this is something that's discussed, and can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
So in the context of the UK, you mean, or with the EU for the CITA?
Yeah, with the UK as we move forward with the transitional agreement.
So the work that the Trade Commissioner Service has been doing, I think, has largely been around informing companies of what is happening with Brexit and making sure that they're able to start to take measures to mitigate their risk. And I appreciate there are difficulties in terms of being able to project a clear message for what's going to happen given the evolving, situation. But I think from what we've heard, companies have largely been able to get the information that they need. But of course, the uncertainty is still there nonetheless for them to have to try to weigh up against.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Bray. On to Mr. Raya for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have 2 questions, and I will limit myself asking it to 2 witnesses. I would like to ask Mr. Hassan Youssef to answer first, followed by Trevor Kennedy of the Business Council of Canada. All the witnesses have highlighted the various things that they would like to see in this agreement between Canada and UK. My question is to both Hassan Youssef and Trevor Kennedy is, what is that one single thing they would like to see in this transitional agreement and beyond? I know agreements like this will need to have so many features, so many things. However, what is their number one, the most important thing on the top of their list that they would like to see in this transitional agreement and beyond?
If I may, I think that much has evolved since Canada negotiated the CIIT agreement and, of course, other agreements. The most recent, of course, is the CUSMA agreement with the United States and Mexico. And my one thing I would say that whatever we do in regard to this transition agreement and, of course, a permanent agreement with the UK, it cannot be any less in terms of the provision that protect workers, of course, and generally it protects the country in terms of investor dispute mechanism. None of these, I'm not going to highlight one thing because the reality is it'll be unwise to do that. But I think in regard to a priority for the country, it cannot be any less than the CUSMA agreement. This has to be the standard in moving forward in regard to any negotiations with the UK.
So we are also a multi-sectoral association, so lots of different perspectives on this. But the clear message I've received from our members is to reduce uncertainty, and I believe the purpose of this transitional approach is to reduce or eliminate that uncertainty going into the next year. On the longer term, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities to speak with businesses and labor and others to identify opportunities to enhance the relationship. But above all else, to reduce uncertainty going into the next year.
Back to you, Mr. Raya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My second question, once again to Hassan Youssef and Trevor Kennedy, is on, this pandemic has affected international trade. For us as Canadians, 60% of our GDP comes from international trade. Due to this pandemic, we have already started seeing disruptions in the international trade. My thing is that there is going to be some sort of reset in how the international trade is conducted. So I would like to ask them, in their opinion, what is the most significant change to Canada? What is the most significant change to Canada they see in international trade due to this pandemic?
I think my colleague Larry Brown has just pointed out, I think one of the things that's very apparent for the country, and of course, I think just about all sector of Canadian economy is reflected on this. We cannot find ourselves in the position we did when this pandemic started, and not having the ability to have access to things that are so basic to the fundamental health of protecting Canadians. But we recognize fundamentally that countries are going to play politics, and the pandemic doesn't stop them from doing that. China, of course, restricts certain exports to our country in a moment of crisis. The United States did that in a moment of a crisis, and we had to figure out how we are going to provide Canadians with PPE and other necessary equipment to ensure we can protect the health and safety of Canadians. We can never allow a trade agreement to ever impede our ability to protect our population. And fundamentally, I think governments have to take that into consideration in any further new negotiations in regard to international trade.
So I think there's one big issue that is actually, I guess, looking at an issue that preceded the COVID-19 crisis, but has become more urgent today, which is around trade diversification. Our members are still very focused on diversification, but particularly this time looking at it within the lens of working with reliable trade partners. And we think the UK, many partners in the Indo-Pacific, in Europe, are part of that reliable trade network. So we think that this initiative and others to build more reliable partnerships, including more reliable supply chains, will be a focus going forward and stemming directly from this crisis.
My third question, Madam Chair, once again to this same two witnesses is, this pandemic has shown the shortcomings of the international trade, wherein we did not have access to the critical needs of Canadians. So the concept of self-reliance is coming up now, at least on the things that are critical to the health and security of Canadians. However, as Canada, we are dependent on international trade. So where is that we can draw a line on the need for self-reliance? If every country emphasizes self-reliance, import substitution, that
Hold on, Christine. We seem to have a.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I'll just make it very quick, short question.
Yes, because your time is about up.
Okay. Where do we draw a line between the need for self-reliance for our critical products and the need for the international trade flow to be smooth? Where is that we have to draw the line?
Can I get brief answers from Mr. Youssef and Mr. Kennedy, please?
Well, very briefly, I think what we have seen as a result of this pandemic, that the protection of your population, health and safety, and more importantly, to ensure that in a moment of crisis, you're not going to be thrown out of the country. I think governments have to make decisions. What are in trade agreements are going to impede that ability for that to happen? And we certainly have to learn from this experience, because rest assured, there will be a repeat of it, and we cannot allow that to, of course, to impact Canadian government ability to protect its own citizens.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have to move on to Mr. Sabar Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Oui, alors, merci.
Thank you to the witnesses for their presentation. So, Mr. Youssef, you've talked about this mechanism for conflict resolutions, and the committee will have to study this issue in the next few weeks or months, depending on our schedule. And this issue was also dealt with by Mr. Brown. So I would like to address my question to both of you. Could you tell us what are the concrete consequences of this mechanism? And does that mean that when CUSMA eliminated that mechanism, does that mean that when we eliminate that, we should not accept an agreement that presents one?
CUSMA has recognized fundamentally the corrosive nature of Chapter 11 in trade agreements, and more importantly, I think the ultimate, of course, argument that we make, if the domestic court is good enough for Canadian investors, if they have a claim against their governments regarding infringement, why should foreign multinationals have a different mechanism? Why isn't our court system the place for them to go and seek redress if they believe our government action in some way impede their ability to operate their business? I don't think there should be two mechanisms. Fundamentally, I believe the decision to eliminate this in CUSMA was the right decision. But equally, I think it should now be eliminated in any future new trade agreements that exist, because all it will do will continue, of course, to manifest itself in a way that will continue to undermine the democratic institutions of our society.
Sorry, I was so busy listening, I forgot to unmute myself. Two things. One, just the core issue of ISDS has always been that international corporations have more rights to challenge domestic government than citizens of the country do. And that just strikes me as so absurd from the get-go that I'm not sure how we ever got those into a trade deal. They obviously, I know who asked for them, but why a government would ever agree to give corporations more rights than its citizens just strikes me as a very strange proposition. But let me read from Norton Rose Fulbright, not the National Union of Norton Rose Fulbright. That's a big law firm. And what they say is some of the steps that were taken by governments to address the virus's unprecedented economic impact of the world economy, such as the payment of state aid to airlines. That's from their letter. The restriction on the import and export of commodities. They then say right after that, they say some of these measures will affect foreign investors and their investments in host states, triggering investor-state disputes. So we're not imagining it, that the existence of ISDS, and that's in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and it's in the CITA agreement, according to law firms, some of the things that our governments had to do to cope with the pandemic are going to, after the pandemic has passed, the law firms are going to wait, give us the grace period, wait till the pandemic has passed, and then they're going to pounce with a whole bunch of ISDS clauses. So my personal view is that we should be doing two things: making sure that we never sign another agreement with an ISDS clause in it, because they're just unfathomably off base. But secondly, we should double back and get rid of the ISDS clauses that we've got in existing agreements. There's a whole movement internationally for ISDS amnesty, to say that any action of governments that they took during the pandemic to control the health of their citizens or the health of their economy would be exempt from ISDS clauses. And we should be signing on to that and making sure that that happens.
Eh bien, Madame la Présidente, combien?
Madam Chair, how much time do I have left? 1 minute. So very quickly, since Mr. Youssef and Mr. Brown, you've also talked about the environment. And you said that in some agreements, the environment was mentioned, but without any binding clauses. Wouldn't it be adequate to mention that an agreement will be submitted to world environmental agreements?
I think there's no denial that
Mr. Youssef, could you bring your mic closer to your mouth, please?
Yes, I said, I think it's absolutely unequivocal that trade agreements need to address the environment. It'd be absolutely absurd not to do so, given that trade could exacerbate and, more importantly, impact the important role that we need to do and play in regard to how we're going to meet our climate change objective in the Paris Agreement. So it's fundamental. Of course, the CUSMA agreement did not make any mention of this. The United States government wants nothing to do with mention of the environment. And now that the administration is about to leave, I'm hoping that the new administration would see it fit to say we need to fix and remedy this problem in the CUSMA agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Youssef. On to Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, you had mentioned a study looking at CITA and the economic consequences of CITA. I'm just wondering if you would mind tabling that with the committee.
Be happy to. Yep.
Thank you very much. And I would just put, because of our time constraints here, I'll just put the question quickly to each of our witnesses if they have studies that would seek to quantify the economic effect of having a transitional deal with the UK versus not having a transitional deal with the UK, and if they would be prepared to table any such studies that they may be aware of. Mr. Kennedy, would you be willing to table anything with the
with the committee to that effect?
We haven't conducted any impact assessment. What I've heard is purely anecdotal from member companies and speaking about what impact it would have on their business. So I'm not sure if there have been any studies conducted, but I'd be interested to see those as well.
Thank you. Mr. Agnew.
As I alluded to in my opening remarks, there was a study that was done by actually a Canadian economist, Dan Churiak, and this was looking at the impact in a Canada-UK context of the UK's ratification of CITA. There are some health warnings that I mentioned about why it's not apples to apples comparison on what a transition agreement means, but I think it actually provides a fairly good signpost that can be used, and I would be happy to share those studies directly with the clerk.
Thank you very much. Mr. Youssef?
We haven't conducted any study, but I will check with my colleague, Chris Roberts, to see if we have colleagues who have done so. And if we do, we will be happy to, of course, submit it to the committee.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that greatly. I guess one of the things that I would be interested to hear from our witnesses on, and maybe I'll start with Mr. Youssef and Mr. Brown, is what we've often heard in discussing Canadian trade and how we shape the economy coming out of the pandemic, that one of the things that Canada lacks and has lacked for a long time is any kind of real industrial strategy. Like the Canadian government hasn't really identified those sectors in which it wants to see Canada take a leadership role, and we don't really have a plan for those industries. So how do we negotiate a trade deal in a context where we don't have, and we haven't done, any meaningful industrial planning? I'm wondering if you might be able to speak a little bit to that question. As I say, we'll start with Mr. Brown and then go to Mr. Youssef.
Okay, thank you. A very intriguing question. One of the things that we've seen for probably 30 years now is in any sort of planning for our economy has been signing another trade deal, which actually, every time we do that, it further eliminates or limits our ability to actually plan our economy. It just becomes a sort of ongoing contradiction. One of the fascinating things about trade deals, though, is if you look back at if you look back at every successful developed economy, or whatever the current description of it, basically they all used mechanisms that would now be invalid under trade deals. So that the way that we got to be rich and powerful, we can no longer use because we gave away those rights under trade deals. And we're now saying to other countries that aren't yet rich and powerful, well, you can never get where we are because we want to sign a trade deal with you that will take away your right to do the things that we did to get here. So it seems to me that most of what we're talking about with trade deals, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, CUSMA, the CITA, and anything new with the UK, would be simply further limiting our ability to make independent economic decisions on behalf of our own people. Because what trade deals are is fundamentally, and an academic from the University of Toronto came up with this term, they're international corporate constitutions. They say what governments can't do, not what governments can do. They're all limitations on the ability of governments to control the behavior of international corporations, which is the exact opposite of an industrial strategy. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Youssef.
Okay. Just a short answer, Mr.
Yes,
Youssef.
very briefly. I mean, I was simply called on the committee to do an assessment and an impact study as to how a transitional agreement and a permanent agreement with the UK will impact Canadian industry. Of course, we know from experience that we lost the auto pact, not because we wake up one morning and said we're not going to have it. We, of course, were negligent in our negotiations, not to exclude it from our signing of the WTO agreement. And subsequently, that agreement is completely gone. It put Canada, of course, in a much more difficult position in maintaining, of course, a strong industry that we had in this country that provided millions of jobs and development for a key part of the Canadian economy.
Mr. Blakey, you still have 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I might just throw it out to our other two witnesses if they want to talk to the issue of industrial planning and how you negotiate trade agreements in the absence of any meaningful industrial planning.
Well, just to say that I mean, we don't have a coherent industrial plan. Really, what our industrial policy in this country has been is actually the summation of sort of a patchwork of policies at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. And ultimately, what you do in an FTA reflects your domestic industrial policy. So, people like to talk a lot about the CITA's intellectual property provisions on pharmaceuticals. Yes, there were some changes that were made around patent term restoration, but at the end of the day, fairly marginal in the grand scheme of things, and that reflected actually our own domestic IP policy. And to respond to the point about democracy and taking away the rights of governments, at the end of the day, sovereign governments remain sovereign to withdraw from these agreements. And if governments and their citizens are not happy with them, invoke the withdrawal clause, and that is the way to get out. These are not permanently binding on governments in perpetuity once you sign the dotted line.
And that's as simple as Brexit. Thank you very much.
As we've all seen.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blakey. On to Mr. Abitaf for 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, and thank you, witnesses, for appearing before committee this morning. The question to Mr. Agnew and Mr. Kennedy is, do you believe that we will have an agreement on December 31st?
How many angels can you dance on the pin of a needle? I'm not saying it to be flippant. I genuinely don't know. I'm not in the room. But what I will say, just as a very matter of fact observation, is that we have to both finish the discussions, introduce implementing legislation, pass the legislation, and then operationalize it. So time is running very, very short to do all of those steps.
Mr. Kennedy?
I mean, I would echo that. I mean, it's hard to say. We're not in the room and not part of the negotiations. I'm certainly hopeful, but we don't have much time.
Beyond being hopeful, if you don't mind, the question is, do you believe that the government have a contingency plan in order that we fall short of an agreement by the end of this year?
So I think in that case, you'd have to speak to, I guess, the team at Global Affairs and others that are working more directly on this. I imagine they've been thinking about that inevitability for some time now. But once again, very hopeful that we do have an agreement in place or some sort of a mechanism to bridge at the end of the year.
It's surprising that organizations such as the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the Business Council of Canada not somehow in light of what's going on. I think it's very important for such organizations to be part of, at least the consultation on this end. So if there's no agreement, and hopefully there will be one, which industries you believe that will be at the forefront, that will be most affected by the circumstance, and how would the job market will look like if we don't have one?
I suppose it depends on how long the gap between the end of the Brexit transition period. But we have a fairly diverse trade relationship, an investment relationship. And so, I would hope that, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that we have momentum in the market and we want to keep that momentum going forward. So to the greatest extent possible, we'd want to continue to build up that competitive position that we've been able to establish under CITA and to keep that going forward through a transitional deal and then eventually a more permanent arrangement. So I guess we'll see how things turn out, but Canada's in a good position now relative to others, and we want to keep it that way.
Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Agnew, again?
So I think in terms of the macroeconomic sort of downside to the Canadian economy, it is much more weighted towards those who export goods as opposed to those that are exporting services. I guess if we are in a world where an agreement has been finalized before December 31st, but not yet gone through the parliamentary procedures, then certainly we would hope that the government would be able to look at some kind of measure to perhaps sort of exercise some discretionary forgiveness so that a company's not in a situation where, the agreement's kind of on the cusp, but they have to pay a tariff nonetheless. In very simple terms, if you're having to pay that tariff, someone has to eat that cost. And so perhaps you might be knocking off something from the price that you were expecting to anticipate, or having to pay out additional costs that you weren't anticipating when you first signed your contract with your buyer.
So as far as the COVID-19 and the effect on everything we do, given the circumstances that this could go beyond the end of this year. How do you see now that the COVID-19 is affecting our international trade in general? And looking at CETA, which is an agreement with the EU right now, do you believe that a lot of CETA will be translated into a new agreement with UK?
So I think the international trade picture for Canadian companies has absolutely settled down since March. I mean, there still are industries that are not doing as well as they should. So if you're exporting a service, particularly because of travel restrictions, that is quite difficult to do at the moment. But I think people that are moving physical products have largely seen their prospects settle down. Just on the second part of your question about moving over the agreement, as I understand it, it is largely going to be a sort of transposition of the whole package with only a sort of renegotiation where there's a numeric value, because that value was written for 28 EU countries, whereas the UK might have a different, whether it's a TRQ or a derogation quota.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agnew. On to Mr. Sarai for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is to Mr. Youssef. Is there any gap or discrepancy between Canada's labor laws and the UK's labor laws that we should be aware of? And is your concern in adding labor protective measures more to protect us and labor going forward? Or is it to enhance labor protection that perhaps Canada has and the UK does not? If you can just elaborate on that.
Well, I don't know all of the UK laws offhand in regard to comparison with ours, but fundamentally, I think that we want to ensure, of course, this is going to be a new agreement between our two countries. And fundamentally, I think it's critical, given the steps we've taken in the CUSMA agreements, to make sure that we're consistent with how we approach trade, but equally how we're going to protect workers' rights within the context of trade. And I think the UK have, of course, the capacity to respond to this. It's a developed country. It's certainly recognize the role of the ILO and, of course, the core conventions of the ILO, that must be there. But equally so, I think that putting in the agreement gives us, of course, mechanism should there be violation, whether it's in our country, but equally in the UK, that both countries will have obligations and responsibility to ensure we're not allowing that to become the competitive advantage of how we're going to conduct our international trade within our two countries.
So the concern is more to protect labor laws that are in existence and commitments already done, not worried about, say, as opposed to CUSMA, where it was to increase levels, say, for example, in Mexico. This is more to protect them going forward and to make sure there's no gaps in between. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
In the context of the CUSMA agreement, as you know, Mexico, if you look at their labor laws and their books, actually is quite remarkable how strong they are. The reality is, of course, they don't enforce it. We don't want to see that in the UK, as the UK will now be an independent trading bloc outside of the EU. We don't want the UK to use this position to undermine its labor laws simply to gain an advantage of how it's going to conduct its exports into other countries. So it's critical that we underpin our relationship based on some fundamental values as to how we're going to hold the UK accountable for the commitment it currently and previously may have had, but equally how it's going to enhance it and protect it going forward.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Kennedy, I just wanted to ask for ISDS provisions. In the past, can you say if it's been used a lot, either by Canada against the UK or vice versa, and if there has been much of an issue on this provision?
So I specifically, I guess, in the CETA context, and I know it's an area of trade policy I'm less familiar, but from what I understand in CETA's context, the investor court system, which replaced ISDS, is not enforced for CETA until all the members fully ratify the agreement. So I don't know if that's applicable to our current relationship with the UK. But you know, I think there is still a value in investor provisions and agreements. When we started studying CETA, and this is going back a decade ago now, a quarter of FDI in Canada came from the European Union, including the UK. And that investment is a source for a lot of good paying jobs in Canada. And we like to keep that investment flow open and make Canada an attractive place to invest.
My next question is also to you, Mr. Kennedy. Where do you see where CETA or other trade agreements we have with the UK that are in effect currently, while CETA cedes, where can we enhance our trading position so that we can gain new markets? So any particular industries that are striving to make gains in the UK that if we were able to make some amendments or achieve some better relaxations or market access, where would that be?
So I think this exercise provides an opportunity for Canada. We, at least in terms of looking towards the free trade agreement in the future, because in the immediate sense, the transitional deal, we want to limit disruption. But the UK and Canada have a very close relationship. I think we have a complementary economies. And you know, I don't want to get ahead of you know, specific companies or industries that will certainly have their own perspectives. But I would imagine outside of the EU context, there's a lot of areas that we can work closer together. And Canada, for, you know, Mark mentioned before on critical minerals, for instance, there's a lot of interest in critical minerals that goes into a lot of the green technology that I know a lot of countries are very interested in developing. And Canada can be a useful partner for the UK going forward, and potentially a free trade agreement could help facilitate that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. On to Mr. Savard Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question, maybe this time for Mr. Agnew and Mr. Kennedy. In July 2019, there was a study, a survey done by the federal government showing that about 3/4 of SMEs in Canada, and we know that in Quebec, these small enterprises are the main fabric of our economy, they had heard about this free trade agreement with Europe. Only 9% had taken advantage. There seems to be an imbalance between the way the European companies benefited from the Canadian market compared to the reverse situation. How can this agreement with the EU solve this imbalance?
Question. I think one thing I just would say about the sort of headline statistics is that there will be a lot of SMEs who I think just for capacity reasons will not be able to export. There might be you know, just not enough people, because it does take, you know, a fair amount of bandwidth internally, and so not everyone who's an SME today is also ready to export today, but maybe tomorrow they will be able to. In terms of being able to equip those companies, one of the things that I think we can do better in terms of how the Trade Commissioner Service speaks to businesses is being as specific and tangible as possible for what a trade agreement means for that company. And it's not just about promoting it to, say, the manufacturing industry. You have to promote it to the companies so they understand very specifically what the trade agreement means for their specific product that they make. And they have to understand how to get into the market and understand all the navigation of the government red tape, whether it's at the border or other sort of paperwork that needs to be filed in that country. That takes a lot of hand-holding to make it happen, but that is the sort of, you know, labor-intensive work that we need to have that are on the ground with companies to help them take advantage of the agreements.
And on just to add to that, I mean, we actually share, you know, the objective that, you know, we need to see more SMEs take full advantage of our suite of free trade agreements. Canada has some of the best market access to the world of really any other country. We know in a G7's context, we're in a very competitive position, but we know our SMEs haven't taken full advantage of the opportunities yet. And the Trade Commissioner Service is doing a lot of work to focus on this. We think that still should be the focus going forward. I don't have the answers to how we have more small businesses, you know, join export more of their products and services, but it's certainly a goal that we also share.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. On to Mr. Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. To Mr. Youssef and Mr. Brown, I'm just wondering, you know, we know very little about the government's objectives in the current negotiations with the UK, other than that they want to reproduce the terms and conditions of CETA. on some kind of non-permanent basis, I presume, although it's not exactly clear what a transitional agreement really means. Just wondering, given that there are ISDS provisions in CETA, they haven't come into effect yet because there are some European countries that haven't ratified that aspect of the agreement, but presumably in a bilateral agreement, there wouldn't be cause to wait. So I'm just wondering, I know that the government, when it was passing CUSMA, made a lot out of the fact that the ISDS provisions were removed, or the investor state dispute settlement mechanisms. Just wondering if you can speak to whether or not signing a transitional agreement that effectively reproduces CETA between just two parties that that presumably have both agreed to the ISDS provisions of CETA, or would if they reappeared in a transitional agreement. Is that consistent with what the government has said around ISDS in CUSMA? And do you think that a transitional agreement between Canada and the UK should deliberately exclude the ISDS provisions of CETA? We'll start with Mr. Youssef and then go to Mr. Brown.
I would say it should eliminate the ISDS provision. I mean, the government has said clearly that they are looking at negotiating agreements that are much more reflective of what is in CUSMA. And I don't know why you would do something less in regard to a transitional agreement with the UK. By the way, the UK was part of an agreement that they chose to leave. And the reality is, of course, the consequence of that, the world has changed and we have changed our approach to trade negotiation. If that's consistent, I think the UK should, of course, recognize it has to agree to different provisions that it may not be in the CETA agreement. So fundamentally, of course, I would urge the government not to, of course, be consistent with CETA, is to change the provision to reflect the new reality that is taken in the CUSMA agreement.
And Mr. Brown, I think I'm running out of time, but if you just have a very quick answer.
Okay, I'll try and be quick. First of all, the Canadian government did not ask for the removal of ISDS in the new NAFTA. The US government did, and the Canadian government agreed to it somewhat reluctantly. So I'm a little bit nervous about what they will do with the UK. But what they've talked about is replacing ISDS with the new investment court. Well, the new investment, or whatever the title is, I forget, but whatever that is called, basically it's ISDS under new clothes. It's a procedural improvement, but the core of it is still ISDS, so it should be excluded. There's no excuse for continuing with ISDS anymore. It's been proven to be such a monstrous mistake by government.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. On to Mr. Lobb for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. First question I have is for Trevor and Mark, and the question is in regards to consultation. So I'm just wondering, and I hate to put you on the spot here, but how much consultation have you folks at the Business Council and the Chamber had with the department in the negotiations with the trade deal with UK?
So maybe I can start. So I've only been in this position for about half a year, so I can only speak to that point onward. But the department's been very accessible. If we've had any questions, we've been able to reach out and receive a question. Obviously, we're not part of the negotiation, but I do feel like we've been well informed throughout the process. And we've extended that to some of our members as well. We've had an opportunity for some of our member companies to interact with Global Affairs to ask questions around the negotiation itself. The Minister's office has also been accessible as well.
And I think sort of picking up on the comments I had made to Ms. Gray earlier, I think it's fair to say this discussion has been characterized a bit more by sort of industry initiating some of those contacts. We haven't seen the same sort of Gazette notice style. So, but again, echoing kind of Trevor's point as well about the government, both at the departmental and ministerial office level, being accessible when we've sought updates.
Okay. So December 31st is the end of the line here with what we're going to do with UK. If you look at the calendar, there's pretty limited opportunities here, even if there is a deal struck. I mean, there's always a chance that we could, work into the wee hours and get it done. I'm sure that would happen. But failing that, January 1st, what happens when the first container hits the port in England? let's just say?
Well, if you have a good, coming in, you will have to pay a tariff on it according to either the UK's new global tariff regime, if it's going that way, or if you're a Canadian wholesaler or retailer bringing in UK products to sell to Canadians, you will also have to pay a tariff on that product after December 31.
So then, I guess where I'm kind of coming at this is earlier, one of you guys mentioned about certainty, and the market likes certainty, business likes certainty, but really there is no certainty, because the way I look at it is, say, for example, organizations like yours, you've been able to ask questions. Some of your members have been allowed to maybe provide input, but really they don't know. They have to make plans for 2021 and, still under the cloud of a pandemic. And so how is it possible, if we're trying to create, and I'm not criticizing you at all, I'm just saying, if we're trying to create certainty here, how is it we're creating any certainty? It seems like what we've created, the government's created, is chaos almost at one level.
So I would maybe jump in to mention that, I think our experience is very similar to many of our peers around the world. We know that, for example, Australia, New Zealand are trying to conclude agreements as well. And some countries have been able to conclude agreements, whether that's a permanent arrangement mimicking their existing EU agreement. But this is, where it's throughout the Brexit process. We've seen a lot of moving pieces, and even today or this week we may know what that relationship looks like going forward. But for Canada and many other countries, I think it's been a moving target.
Okay. One other thing, did anybody ever kick around the idea of a USMCA UK trade deal where you've incorporated the three countries negotiating the deal? They've already come together in agreement for a North America. Was there any talk about doing a trade deal with UK on those priorities or parameters?
I have not heard anything like that, and I would, in some respects, actually draw some parallels between, that type of idea, with all due respect, and the UK joining CPTPP. Sure, great, we see benefits there, but we also have a mission-critical problem in front of us, which is December 31st is rapidly approaching. So let's get the certainty that we need by the end of this year, and some of the more aspirational and bigger projects we can think about in a different track.
Okay.
1 minute left, Mr. Lobb.
Thanks. Another thing that's very annoying with me with CITA, the way this has been dealt with from agriculture perspective. I'm in an agricultural riding, and we have believe it or not, a beef and a pork. We have a trade deficit with the European Union, and I'm just wondering what's our prospects look like with UK? I mean, they're a little better, but at the same time, are we still gonna have disagreements over antibiotics and growth hormones and other call them non-trade issues?
Unfortunately, we'll still have them on January 1st because the UK is copying over the EU acquis rule book. However, because the UK, generally speaking, within the EU 20 has been more, if I can call it, North American minded on some of these things, I am hopeful that we will be able to get some progress on those the issues that you mentioned, as well as issues that are affecting the crop sector and the issue like sort of MRL misalignment, for example, which has impeded the ability of Canadian crop products to be able to go and access the EU market.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Agnew. On to Ms. Badayan for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all of the witnesses, not only for their appearance today, but because you are very much also on the front lines of this pandemic, supporting our business community, and I know how important your work is in order to help see our Canadian companies and our entrepreneurs through to the other side. So thank you for that. Let me begin perhaps with Mr. Kennedy and as well as Mr. Agnew, but there has been some discussion over the course of this committee meeting regarding consultations, and I just wanted to check in with you both to make sure that it was very clear. We are on the record as a government for saying that our objective with a short-term transitional agreement is to roll over the provisions of CITA. Do you feel like the business community understands, that objective, and that what we are looking for is to create that stability through a transitional rollover?
So I guess on my end, so that's been the understanding. Yes, I mean among I guess larger enterprises, that's the focus. And as we do move into negotiations around an actual free trade agreement, there will be differing views. But right now, everybody is very much focused on how we can preserve our market access under CITA, and then to rethink the relationship from there.
Understood. And I think I heard you say, Mr. Kennedy, in your opening remarks that this transitional approach will allow time for consultation thereafter. Is that right?
Absolutely. And, I know CUSMA's been brought up in several instances. I think that's a great success story. Working with labor, working with industry, working with other groups. I think we've been able to develop a really forward-thinking agreement in that context. And I would hope that with the Canada-UK agreement, we can approach it from a similar standpoint.
I'm going to pick up on the fact that you raised CUSMA because I noted that a few witnesses, are expressing some reservations regarding our ability, to move quickly if an agreement is reached between the two countries. And I think CUSMA is a great example, particularly since it was this committee that was able to move quickly, holding meetings, night and day in order to ensure that was passed. And I believe it was passed hours before the House rose for the pandemic. And so I think that is, a nice thing to remember when comforting our business community, that we can move very quickly as a government. Mr. Agnew, I did want to raise something that was mentioned earlier on in committee. I believe it is your letter, the letter of July, strengthening Canadian supply chain resiliency. You mentioned a number of recommendations and ideas, which I found very interesting. And one of the areas of focus was really regulatory cooperation. And I think you put it best when you said that it is perhaps the least sexy part of trade, but also one of the most important. I am certainly seized of the non-tariff barriers that are affecting our agriculture industry, as is the Minister of International Trade. And I guess I was wondering, in your analysis of the current agreement with CITA and how we might be able to go further, as you put it, what changes would you make to the regulatory cooperation, or do you feel that the regulatory cooperation provisions that we have should be rolled over as is?
So I think the regulatory cooperation provisions should be rolled over to get the process started on day one. I think in terms of what we would like to see going forward, ensuring greater transparency amongst regulators for the decisions that they make. I think the experience of some of our members, particularly in the agriculture sector, is that the EU has arrived at decisions, but how they've arrived at them, I think, has been overly politicized, and shining greater spotlight on that and forcing actually a science basis to these would be quite helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Agnew. And I guess I'll let you have the opportunity as well to respond just on behalf of your membership. I appreciated your introductory remarks, but when it comes to our business community understanding the objective of the transitional agreement, do you feel that that's reasonably clear?
I think people understand the content of what we're trying to reach. I think the one aspect where we could improve communication is actually around the transitional nature. It's not clear exactly what transition means. I mean, it could mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. Are we talking 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? And if you're a business who wants to sort of plan out long-term contracts in the UK, you'll need that certainty. So certainly something that I would encourage, this committee as part of its, report or whatever output it has, is to encourage lots and abundance of communication on that transition point.
That's very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. No, I'm sorry, time is up.
Thank you.
To Mr. Hoback for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses and everybody for being here this morning. Mr. Kennedy, when did we first learn that we're probably going to have to do a trade deal with the U.S. on Brexit? When was that first became aware? Just humor me.
I think it goes back now 2 years or so ago. We were negotiating.
So 2 years ago, and we still don't have any real solid consultations. We don't have a game plan for a final agreement. So the point I'm trying to bring up, right now, the Prime Minister was in the media last week, and I remember brought up about bandwidth. The UK doesn't have bandwidth, which I think is relatively insulting to the UK because they do. But the other thing that's happened is the US elections. So you got the US sitting there close to a deal, and all of a sudden now the UK said, you know what, let's wait for the new administration. So if we had done the consultations, if we'd done all the work that we should have done, we actually could have come in now and actually done an agreement. We could have been putting the final touches on something. But the reality is, we looked at the tariff schedules when they first proposed, and we said, oh, that's good enough. We never talked about digital trade. We never talked about regulatory cooperative. We walked away, which is really dangerous. And now we're in crisis. And I mean crisis because we're sitting here in November and they want to get this through by the end of December through the Senate, not just through the House, through the Senate. Like, so, you know, this government doesn't do anything unless it's a crisis, and it's frustrating. So, you know, when you come to timelines here, like what is going to happen? I'm loading a ship today that's going to hit in January. How do I price those goods? Maybe I'll go to you, Mark. How would you price it?
In the absence of clarity, I would price in the assumption that you're going to have whatever the UK global tariff is for that product.
So as you're pricing your product and you want to export to the UK and you've added the tariff in it, somebody that has an agreement like Chile, what do they do? They come in and take our market. And this government doesn't get it. So they've tried to spin this transition agreement, which if they would have done this a year ago, I could have said maybe that makes sense. But now we have to do it. We don't have a choice because they're totally unprepared to do anything other than a transition agreement. How does that put Canadian businesses front and center? How does that deal with the issues that you brought up, Mr. Agnews?
Well, I mean, it makes our products less cost competitive is the direct answer.
So first mover advantage, do we still have it?
I mean, there will be businesses that have managed to lock in a relationship with a buyer in the UK. So I think there will be folks who can ride it out. And certainly if we have something at least signed but not ratified, then hopefully there would be a degree of certainty. But if that situation continues, then it does call into question perhaps some of those relationships.
So I'm a durum farmer in southern Saskatchewan. I sell wheat into durum into Warburtons in the UK. They also hire hard red spring wheat. How do I price that today?
Again, I think in the absence of having a deal, you have to assume you don't have one. Because if you assume wrong, then someone's going to have to pay for that and eat the cost at the end of the day.
So if you're Warburtons, you buy from the US then, or you buy from somebody else? Very price sensitive, right? Just assuming.
Yeah, I mean, you'll go where it makes business sense to go.
Now, going forward, let's say we do somehow get this shoved through, and Ms. Badan talked about how I did CUSMA and how we're forced that through. And I always found that really interesting. They were pressuring us to get this done. Then it goes back into the House. The Liberals keep putting up speakers and delaying it, which just, we could never figure that out because we said, hey, let it go through, get it to the Senate, get it out here before we get lockdown. So why do you think this government's going to force it so quickly? Is it because it's such a bad deal, just like CUSMA, that we're not going to have the proper time to actually look at it?
Well, I mean, I think that would be a question that you're going to have to ask the government. I can't speak on sort of behalf of their parliamentary affairs strategy.
So how do I, as a member of parliament, I'm a relatively free trader, I want to make sure it's fair and balanced, no question about that. I'm sitting here in December, they're going to throw this in front of me and say, you've got to get this done. And what if it's horrible? What am I to do?
Well, I mean, but Parliament has the right to vote as they choose on the legislation when it arrives, and I think that's sort of just the matter of fact position that you have. I don't really have much further to say on that aspect.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. And I'm sorry I put you on the spot. I don't mean to do that. But we plugged our nose because we said it was Donald Trump effect in the U.S. That isn't the same in the UK. The reality is this government has not been prepared on this file, has been lost asleep at the switch, and now we've got a crisis happening in this sector with the UK, and they're trying to cover their butt. Is that fair to say, Mr. Kennedy?
I think I mean, I'm not a negotiator. I'm just, looking at how other countries have responded. I think we're in a very similar position with many of our peers, but I do hope that we have an agreement
What peers?
in place.
Other peers have gone and done a deal. It's, Chile did a deal. Chile did a deal.
So you can look at South Korea, for instance. They decided to have a continuity agreement in fall of 2019. I guess that was their assessment that was the preferred approach. We have Japan recently. They rolled over the EU Japan EPA with the UK. I mean, I guess our perspective on this is we would prefer to have a transitional approach versus a final agreement. In both instances, they've negotiated a final free trade agreement, and we're racing, I think, against Australia and New Zealand, which would be competitors in some instances. And I think we do have an advantage in the sense that we have an existing agreement to base our transitional deal on. And I do hope that we have something in place before either of those countries have their free trade agreement in place.
So you need a transitional agreement because you haven't consulted to know what you wanted in a real agreement. Is that fair to say?
A very short answer, Mr. Kennedy.
So we've been discussing the transitional context, so I can't discuss a longer term free trade agreement.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Dhaliwal for 5 minutes. Mr. Dhaliwal.
The witnesses. My first question will go to President Mr. Hassan Youssef. President, you have mentioned that when it comes to labor, women, immigrant workers, it comes your priority, and it's my understanding that over the past 5 years, this government has signed CUSMA, CITA, CPTPP, and government's priority has been, when you put a lens, when it comes to gender equality, LGBTQ community rights, and the migrant workers' rights, we have made a significant progress moving in that direction. Do you agree on that perspective? And also, which one is better than the other? We have to follow the same tradition moving forward with UK.
Look back at the most recent agreement with Canada, US, and Mexico. We've certainly have made strides. The labor provisions are now in the key part of the
Mr. Youssef, could you hold your mic, please? The interpreter has problem hearing you. Thank you.
Thank you. I said, if you look back at the CUSMA agreement and the process leading up to that, of course, this agreement represents certainly a significant shift in direction in terms of the labor provisions are integral part of the agreement. The enforceable mechanism of the agreement are, of course, very clearly laid out with obligations and penalties should the countries not live up to their responsibilities. So the CUSMA agreement certainly, I think, for us in terms of the labor provisions have been much more significant than any agreement to be negotiated so far. Of course, it's a new agreement. And the recognition and time will tell us to how effective it is, and more importantly, is it the new model? But clearly, I think it demonstrates that you can do better. And of course, the pressure, of course, in the negotiation of the CUSMA agreement was there for everybody to see, because we had an existing agreement with Mexico and the United States, and we know that it was a failure in regard to the labor provisions. So clearly, this demonstrates a significant I think, accomplishment in some way, but time will tell us to the effectiveness of it. And I think if you were looking for a model, this would be the model going forward, because it recognized key and clear components, but equally, of course, it exacerbates and more importantly, shows that there's a way to go forward that can enhance, of course, the protection of workers in our respective countries. At the same time, of course, allow for our countries to trade in a fair mechanism that are going to ensure that workers are going to benefit from this agreement.
Thank you. And my next question goes to Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Agnew. When I look at the study done by Global Affairs, it clearly shows that, in short term of 3 years that we have a CITA in place, our export to some of the European nations has gone up from 20 to 33%, which tells me that the trade that we are having with the nations that we have an agreement in place is better than the ones that we don't. And do you see that it is important to have trade relations than not having trade relations with other countries? It makes a positive difference in Canadian businesses and Canadian workers' lives.
So if I guess I could hop in on this one first. I think absolutely. I mean, Canada was one of the first countries, certainly advanced economies, to have a comprehensive trade deal with the European Union. You still have many jurisdictions I mentioned before, and New Zealand and Australia are still trying to conclude their own bilateral agreements with the EU. We've now had ours in provisional application, and we do have a first mover advantage. And I think clearly the numbers show that this has been beneficial for Canadian exporters, and we want to maintain that market access. And the UK is a big chunk of that for our access under CETA.
And I mean, I think what you've said actually validates why it's so important to get this Canada-UK deal over the line. If CETA matters, then certainly what is 40% of our trade to the EU matters. And that's why companies do need the certainty of what's going to happen on January 1st.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2 minutes, please.
Pardon. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to come back to my previous question for Mr. Agnew and Mr. Kennedy. Businesses didn't take advantage sufficiently of the European market, and how could we change things in a deal with the United Kingdom? The government should help businesses and should help businesses understand the market so that they can access it. Are there also structural issues with the non-tariff barriers in the UK, in the European Union, and should we expect that such problems will also be present with the UK?
I guess I can jump in first. I think, obviously the Trade Commissioner Service has a large role to play here, as with any of our trade agreements. They're a great resource available to Canadian businesses, and I think that's the most obvious place where we'd want to see, more focus. And there's actually, I think that's been the shift in focus in the last couple of years is towards SMEs and helping them to understand and navigate our trade agreements. We'll see what this agreement looks like, I guess, looking towards the future oriented agreement with the UK. But I certainly hope that it would be one that's accessible to businesses of all sizes.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. On to Mr. Blakey for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. On the theme of the importance of trading relationships to Canada, I just want to circle back to Mr. Brown. I think you had mentioned this earlier in your testimony. Are comprehensive trade agreements required in order for Canada to have successful trading relationships with other countries?
Well, not on the evidence. There's a kind of strange assumption that trade equals trade deals, as if somehow before we had trade deals there was no international trade. Well, there was, obviously, and the average tariff barrier between us and the European Union before we got into CETA was the average was 2%. 2% tariff barrier on average is not going to be preventing trade, and it didn't. I remember the European Commission visitors are here insisting on the absolute necessity of CETA, and I went through the list of things that we can buy now in Canada, like Volvos and European chocolate, and I said, what exactly is missing from this list that is now going to be exported to Canada once we get CETA? And there was a blank look because they couldn't think of one. I mean, the idea that trade equals trade deals has never been true, isn't true now. And there's been studies by Jim Stanford, for example, that show that in many places our increase in trade was bigger with countries that didn't have trade deals than it was with countries that did. And so, there may be some linear increase in trade with the European Union in a particular area. Was that all caused by CETA, or was it caused by something else? Somebody would have to have a look at that. It isn't necessarily the case that simply CETA caused all of that increase, when in many other cases that wasn't the end result.
So you can imagine a scenario where Canada might seek to get some more certainty for certain industries that are really volatile or particularly strategic, but not necessarily sign a comprehensive trade agreement that would cover all sectors of the economy.
Exactly. If you go back to the original GATT agreements, when they were being negotiated, that was General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. And tariffs is, that can be a factor, of course. Countries can use tariffs to develop their own industries, which we've done in history often. But sometimes tariffs can get in the way of a particular kind of trade, and those should be approached one-on-one. But trying to say that if there's a tariff problem in item X, we therefore need a comprehensive trade agreement that's going to limit our ability to regulate and do all of the other things just doesn't really follow.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. On to Ms. Gray, 3 minutes or so, because we need the last 5 minutes for some committee updates on committee business. So Ms. Gray for 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Mr. Kennedy, Business Council. You had mentioned, that the government had answered questions that you had and were being responsive. And I'm wondering if in some of those conversations that you had with different officials at the government, if they expressed when they were having trade negotiations, when they were having trade talks, because we haven't seen any kind of a timeline per se. So do you have any information that you can provide as to when some of these conversations might have been happening?
So I wouldn't know a clear timeline, but when I've had questions, I've reached out to and I guess the team working on it at Global Affairs, and they've answered my questions. But I've never received a clear timeline of when discussions are taking place and at what level. Okay, and did you ever get the impression that with this transitional agreement that it was just really easy? We were basically rolling over what was already existing. That's what we've sort of heard today. And if that's the case, then why don't we have an agreement if that's the case, if it's so easy? So from what I've understood, a lot of the negotiation actually took place before there's reference made to this before, but around when Theresa May was the prime minister and the releasing of their initial MFN tariff schedule. I think before that and before Canada disengaged, a lot of work was done in advance, and some of that work has been picked up over the fall. I think there's a small number of areas left outstanding, as usually is the case in trade agreements, but I'm not sure what exactly those are. Okay, that's quite a time gap between there. I mean, we also know that Australia and New Zealand are undergoing rounds of talks, and have you heard if Canada's actually having these rounds of trade negotiations in the conversations you've had? I haven't, but raising those two examples, I mean, good partners for Canada, but in the UK we're competitors, and so I would hope that Canada has an agreement in place before either of those two partners. Good, thank you. I have a question for Canadian Labour Congress. I'd like to ask you, have you had, and we've heard from other speakers today that there hasn't really been outreach into the business community, and I'm wondering if you had any outreach from the government to you from the labour aspect, looking at all of the members that you represent.
A short answer, Mr. Youssef, please.
Let my colleague Chris Roberts answer. I know there's been some briefing, but I haven't been directly involved.
Can't hear. Not able to hear.
No, to my knowledge, there has not been outreach just yet. Doesn't mean that we can't get questions answered the same way that the Business Council and the Chamber have implied, but no, we haven't been involved in consultations.
Well, that's really unfortunate considering how many members you represent across the country.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. I'm sorry that we're short of time. Mr. Sheehan, I'm sorry you'll have to wait until our next meeting to get your questions answered. Thank you very much for the witnesses for being here today and supplying us with some information that is very valuable. I need to update and get a bit of direction from the committee as we move forward. So we will continue this Canada-UK study this Friday, and we will hear from the officials. And then next Monday, November the 23rd, we're going to have 2 meetings, and we'll hear from 8 witnesses. But the analysts have indicated that if the committee wants to introduce and table in the House a short interim report, they can only include the witnesses up until November the 20th. So I'm suggesting the following, that if the committee approves, that we adopt a short interim report summarizing the main points raised during the hearings that we have heard, And then we would be able to review a draft report December the 2nd and table it in the House December the 4th. And that the analysts work over the holidays to do a fuller report. And following our return the end of January, we would then review that report. And at that point, we may have additional information that we may want to add into that report or to do something in addition to that. Would that be all right with the committee if we take that route? So we'll get an interim report in before Christmas, and then we'll follow it up with a fuller report come the end of January. If the committee's okay with that, that's the process I am recommending via the conversation with the analyst. Is that all right with everyone? And then we would move into the COVID-19.
Ms. Groh, maybe we can say to the witnesses that they could leave the meeting if they want to.
Yes. I thought I had indicated that. Thank you again to the witnesses. You're welcome to end your fabulous 2 hours with us. Thank you. And
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like some clarification what would be included in the interim report, whether or not that will include recommendations and whether or not that would include any written submissions that might have been presented by that date.
The analysts have indicated that all testimonies that up until Friday, November the 20th, are all they would be able to put into the interim report. Plus, I assume anything that's been sent in to us as far as documentation could also be included in that.
May I clarify just one little thing?
Please.
I think, and maybe Bashar could just confirm what my understanding was that the main points of the testimonies up to the 23rd would be summarized in an interim report of approximately 3 to 5 pages. Bashar, am I right on that?
Yes. Up to the 23rd, testimony of the 23rd. We can summarize it in an interim report to the committee.
So then we would be able to include those that November 23rd, where we're having 2 meetings. So that gives you a fairly substantial amount of information to put forward. Ms. Gray, are you okay? You follow that?
So I'm if we could just have clarification if there'll be recommendations as well. And I guess part of this as well is that when we as a committee discussed this study, we knew what the timelines were going to be, and we all agreed to the timelines. And at that point, we hadn't heard from anyone that those timelines wouldn't be met. So I'm just wondering. I think the other thing that we need to consider as well is this committee had 1 meeting since March, and so the workload of this committee hasn't been really overloaded, and so I would really like to implore that we fulfill what was laid out actually in the motion and fulfill what the study is based on the timelines that were in the motion.
If I may just
that's exactly what we're doing, Madam Clerk.
If I may just add, like we were supposed to have a meeting on November the 3rd, the 13th, which was canceled because we didn't have any time slot. So that's why the November 13 meeting is back to November 23rd. So that's part of the problem.
Yes, and then the fact that we haven't had meetings since March, just a reminder that we're dealing with a pandemic, and there weren't any meetings happening anywhere. So if we move forward,
Madam Chair, point of order. If I may, I sat on a committee that sat all summer, so there were other committees that sat all summer. But
those were only the ones that had the opportunity because they were registered as critical committees that had to go.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate that just having one meeting pushed off then now delays us over a month.
It all depends if the committee wants. I'm suggesting, as the analysts have recommended, that we do a short interim report before Christmas because of the time sensitivity. And then we will do a fuller report towards the end when we come back. And we may want to be able, and we may have the opportunity then to add some additional information into that report to make it a fuller report at that particular time. Mr. Hoback.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is just a question on process. If we do see legislation come forward, how are we going to deal with this? When I look at our schedules and our timelines, like Ms. Medallion, maybe you can give us some insight, because if something is coming forward that has to be ratified through the Senate before we break for Christmas, I look at our timeline and I look at our report and I'm kind of sitting here saying, boy, this doesn't make a lot of sense, because we're going to finish a report after the December 31st deadline. Now, I understand you have to do an interim report. I get that, and I'm okay with doing that. But what I'm concerned about as I look forward is how the heck are we going to get some priority to do Zoom meetings to do actual legislation? So that needs to be brought up with the gods above to say, okay, we have legislation coming when? How's it going to go through the House? What's it going to look like? Because that needs to happen probably this week or next week, because anything after that is not physically possible to get through our House unless we're going to hold the House up until December 19th and hold the Senate here through Christmas. If that's the game plan of the Liberal government, hey, we're on board. We can do that. But they need to give us a signal just how serious they are in getting this done before December 31st, because right now I don't see how it's physically possible to get it done. I don't see it unless you totally neglect Parliament, which they've done in the past, and do it that way.
Madam Chair, I have to
Mr.
be
Wright?
somewhere else at 1 p.m. and unfortunately I can't continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Raya.
Now,
Chair,
if there is any
could I
voting that is
respond?
required,
Yeah, we have okay.
Madam Chair?
I think Ms. Badayan, I don't see the speakers list on my screen yet.
Yes,
but
it was I just
oh yes, go ahead, Ms. Badayan.
Was looking to respond to Mr. Hoback. I think that what you'll see, Mr. Hoback, is the government willing to adjust in order to do what's necessary. I think everybody in this committee is certainly committed to ensuring the stability of international trade for us. We just heard from some important witnesses about how important that is for our companies. So if a deal is reached, I think we can find a way to make this happen. Certainly the study that we're undertaking now would have to be adjusted. I believe that is possible if necessary, and I certainly hope that we will be able to do that quickly and make it all happen. I don't particularly see a problem myself with going forward as the chair suggests, but if you and Ms. Gray would prefer not to have an interim report, I mean, that can certainly be discussed as well.
Exactly. Mr. Lobb?
Thanks, Madam Chair. The only thing I would say in regards to an interim report is that, just my own opinion, and maybe it's mine alone, today's information we got from the 4 organizations, although very reputable, really didn't provide any insight at all as to where we are in a trade deal or what we're looking to gain or to lose. It was kind of Wikipedia 101 on what we heard today. And so we'd probably need to hear some more details from other witnesses, pro, con, good, bad, to do an interim report that wouldn't be anything we couldn't pick off of Wikipedia. That's all.
Madam Chair, can I just respond to that by saying that Friday we have the negotiators coming to this committee in order to update us on the negotiations. I don't see why we were asking witnesses that are not part of the negotiations what the state of the negotiations were. I think that we will have our interim report, reflect the testimony that we'll hear from our negotiators on Friday and on the 2 meetings that we have on Monday.
Well, Ms. Benday, I agree. That's fantastic. Okay. But I guess I would just interject and say the organizations that were here today basically just said, if I have a question, I can email somebody and they'll write me back a response. It just didn't sound like many of them have been included in the negotiations to see where things would go forward. Maybe on Friday, the negotiators will tell us otherwise. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Blakey, very quickly.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, in the case that we are filing a small interim report with just a summary of some testimony, if there'll be a possibility to have a supplementary report or dissenting report attached to that.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. At least getting the bit of the interim report in there indicates some of the concerns of the committee and the directions. All right. Okay. No, seeing what the time is and we're over it. All right. Just to update you, COVID-19 in trade will continue in November, as well as, and then December the 7th, we'll start to talk about WTO. That's the plan. But you know, we always have to have some flexibility as we move forward on it. All right. Thank you all very much. We will see you all on Friday at our next committee meeting. Thank you very much all for your participation. Thank you, Madam Clerk, and our analysts and everyone else. Thank you. Have a good day.